Charlotte Hale had everything money could buy, except the freedom to choose who she loved. When her controlling mother hired Marcus Reed, a principled black bodyguard, to protect Charlotte from dangerous men, neither of them expected the real danger would come from within their own hearts. One stolen kiss during a thunderstorm would shatter every rule, every boundary, every carefully constructed wall between them. But when Eleanor Hale discovered her daughter's forbidden romance, she would stop at nothing to destroy it, even if it meant crushing Charlotte's spirit forever. What Eleanor didn't know was that her sheltered daughter had finally found something worth fighting for. And this time, Charlotte refused to be controlled. The battle lines were drawn between duty and desire, between family loyalty and true love, and only one side could win. But which family secret would ultimately determine their fate, and who would pay the ultimate price for choosing love over legacy? If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the Hale townhouse as Charlotte smoothed her navy dress one last time. She'd just returned from lunch with the Whitford family, and her cheeks still burned from the memory. Graham had been pushy again. Too close. Too familiar. When she'd said no to drinks afterward, he'd laughed like she was being silly. Come on, Charlotte. We both know where this is heading. She shuddered, remembering how his hand had lingered on her arm. Charlotte, darling, come to the sitting room. Her mother's voice carried down the hallway, crisp and commanding as always. Eleanor Hale stood by the fireplace, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the heat. She held her phone like a weapon, her manicured fingers tapping against the case. We need to discuss your security situation, Eleanor said without preamble. Charlotte's stomach dropped. What security situation? After today's incident with Graham, nothing happened with Graham. I've decided you need proper protection. Full time. Eleanor's blue eyes were steel. I've called Devin Patel. He's sending someone over this evening. Mother, that's completely unnecessary. Graham was being entitled and aggressive. And if he feels comfortable behaving that way in public, I worry about others who might be less visible about their intentions. Charlotte wanted to argue, but deep down she felt relieved. The idea of having someone between her and the Grahams of the world didn't sound terrible. Fine, she said quietly, but I want to meet them first. I want to approve whoever you're hiring. Eleanor's eyebrows lifted slightly. Of course, darling. This is for your comfort, after all. At 6:30 that evening, the doorbell rang. Charlotte smoothed her jeans and took a deep breath. She'd changed from her dress into something more casual, but she still felt nervous. What if the bodyguard was some huge, intimidating man who would follow her around like a shadow? Eleanor answered the door, and Charlotte heard a warm, professional voice. Mrs. Hale? I'm Marcus Reed from Patel Security. Charlotte stepped into the foyer and stopped. Marcus Reed was not what she'd expected. He was tall, yes, but not in an overwhelming way. His dark skin seemed to glow in the soft light of the chandelier. He wore a simple navy suit that looked well-maintained but not expensive. His hair was cropped short, and when he smiled at Eleanor, his whole face transformed. Miss Hale, he said, turning to Charlotte, I'm here to discuss your security needs. His voice was calm, steady. When he looked at her, she didn't feel examined or judged. She felt seen. Please, call me Charlotte, she said, extending her hand. His handshake was firm but brief, professional. Would you like to sit down? Eleanor gestured toward the sitting room. I can have Maria bring tea. That's kind, but I'd prefer to do a walkthrough first, if that's all right. Marcus looked directly at Charlotte. I like to understand the space I'll be working in, and I'd like Ms. Hale's input on her daily routines. Charlotte blinked. Most people talked about her like she wasn't in the room. Of course, she said. Where would you like to start? For the next hour, Marcus moved through the house with quiet efficiency. He checked the locks on the French doors leading to the garden. He examined the sight lines from the street to the front windows. He asked about the alarm system, the garage entrance, and Charlotte's usual departure times. But what struck her most was how he asked permission for everything. May I look at your bedroom door? I won't go inside, just check the lock mechanism. Is it all right if I test the motion sensors in the hall? Could you show me which route you usually take when you go for your morning run? No one had ever asked her permission for anything. Her life had always been managed, scheduled, and decided by other people. When they finished the tour, they returned to the sitting room where Eleanor waited with the tea service. Everything seems secure, Marcus said, settling into the chair across from Charlotte. The alarm system is solid, and the location gives us good visibility of approaches. Excellent. Eleanor poured 3 cups. Now, let's discuss your schedule, Charlotte. Marcus will need to know about your charity meetings, social events. Actually, Marcus interrupted gently. I'd like to hear directly from Ms. Hale about her preferences. What makes you feel most comfortable? Are there situations that make you nervous? Charlotte set down her teacup, surprised by the question. I don't like being crowded, and I prefer to know what's happening rather than just being told where to go. That's completely reasonable. Marcus pulled out a small notebook. What about physical proximity? Some clients prefer their security to be invisible. Others like to know exactly where their protection is at all times. Somewhere in between? Charlotte thought about Graham's unwelcome closeness. Close enough to help if needed, but not hovering. Marcus nodded and wrote something down. And what about personal space in the car? Some clients prefer their security to drive. Others like to drive themselves with protection following. I don't drive much in the city, Charlotte admitted. But I'd like to sit where I can see out, not feel trapped. Understood. Eleanor watched this exchange with a slight frown, as if she weren't used to not controlling the conversation. When would you start? Eleanor asked. If Ms. Hale is comfortable with the arrangement, I can begin tomorrow morning. Marcus looked at Charlotte. I usually arrive about 30 minutes before your first scheduled activity. Is 7:30 too early? That's perfect, Charlotte said quickly. I'm always up by 7 anyway. Marcus smiled, and Charlotte felt something flutter in her chest. It was a real smile, not the polite professional mask she was used to seeing. Then I'll see you tomorrow morning, he said, standing. Mrs. Hale, Miss Hale, thank you for your time. After he left, Eleanor turned to Charlotte with a satisfied expression. He seems competent, Eleanor said. Devin assures me he has excellent references. Former military, specialized training. Charlotte nodded absently. She was thinking about how Marcus had looked directly at her when she spoke. How he'd waited for her answers instead of assuming what she wanted. Yes, she said. He seems different. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, she wasn't dreading tomorrow. She wasn't worried about unwanted advances or uncomfortable situations. She felt safe. The next morning, Charlotte was ready at 7:15. She'd chosen a simple blue dress and flats, something comfortable for the day's errands. When the doorbell rang precisely at 7:30, she felt her heart speed up. Good morning, Marcus said when she opened the door. He wore the same navy suit, but with a different tie. His smile was warm but professional. "Ready for the day?" "Yes, but I should warn you. It's probably going to be boring. Just a trip to the florist and then the bank." "Boring is good," Marcus said. "Boring means safe." They walked to the car together, and Charlotte noticed how Marcus moved. He was alert but not jumpy, aware but not paranoid. He opened the back door for her, but waited for her to nod before stepping back. "Is this comfortable?" he asked, settling into the driver's seat. "I can adjust the mirrors if you'd prefer a different angle." "This is fine." Charlotte fastened her seatbelt, struck again by his consideration. The drive to the florist was quiet, but not awkward. Marcus kept his eyes on the road and traffic, but when Charlotte mentioned which flowers she planned to buy, he listened. "Peonies are beautiful this time of year," he said. "My grandmother grew them in her backyard." "Do you garden?" Charlotte asked, surprised by this glimpse into his life. "Not much anymore, but I remember helping her weed between the flower beds when I was little." His voice carried a note of fondness. "She always said plants could tell if you cared about them." Charlotte found herself smiling. I think she was right. At the florist, Marcus positioned himself where he could see both the entrance and Charlotte. Close enough to help, far enough to give her space. When the florist's assistant tried to flirt with her a little too aggressively, Marcus simply stepped closer. The young man immediately backed off. "Thank you," Charlotte murmured as they left with her armload of white peonies. "For what?" "For not making that into a big scene. For just handling it quietly." Marcus held the car door for her. "That's what I'm here for." The bank was equally smooth. Marcus had clearly studied the layout beforehand because he knew exactly where to position himself. When they returned to the car, Charlotte felt more relaxed than she had in weeks. "Where to next?" Marcus asked. "Home, I think, unless you need to check in with your office or anything." "I'll call Devin later. This is your time." As they drove back through the city, Charlotte watched Marcus's reflection in the window. His hands were steady on the steering wheel. His posture was alert, but relaxed. Everything about him projected calm competence. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Why did you become a bodyguard?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I was in the military for 8 years, he said finally. "When I came home, I wanted to keep helping people, but in a different way, more personal." "Do you like it?" "I do. Every client is different. Every situation is unique." He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "And I'm good at reading what people need." Charlotte believed that. In just 24 hours, Marcus had shown more awareness of her comfort than most people managed in months of knowing her. When they arrived home, Eleanor was waiting in the foyer with a slight frown. "How did it go?" she asked. "Perfectly," Charlotte said, meaning it. Eleanor's eyes moved between Charlotte and Marcus, as if looking for something to criticize. "Marcus, I'll need a copy of your schedule for the rest of the week, and I'd like to discuss protocols for social events." "Of course, Mrs. Hale. I'll send that over this afternoon." Eleanor nodded curtly and disappeared into her study. Marcus turned to Charlotte. "Same time tomorrow?" "Yes. And Marcus? Thank you for today." "My pleasure, Ms. Hale." "Charlotte," she corrected. "Please." His smile was soft. "Charlotte." After he left, Charlotte found herself standing in the foyer longer than necessary, still hearing the way her name sounded in his voice. By the end of the first week, Charlotte had settled into a rhythm with Marcus that felt surprisingly natural. He arrived exactly when he said he would. He anticipated her needs without being intrusive. And he treated her like an adult capable of making her own decisions. It was revolutionary. On Thursday evening, storm clouds gathered over the city. Charlotte could see them darkening through the tall windows of the sitting room as she tried to read. The air felt heavy and electric. At 9 o'clock, she gave up on her book and went to the kitchen to make tea. The house was quiet. Eleanor had retired early with a headache, and Maria had gone home after dinner. Charlotte put the kettle on and pulled out her favorite mug, a simple blue ceramic one she'd bought at a street fair years ago. As she waited for the water to boil, thunder rumbled in the distance. She loved storms, but they also made her nervous. Something about the unpredictability, the way they could turn violent without warning. The kitchen door opened quietly, and Marcus stepped in. "Just doing a final check," he said. "I saw the lights on." Charlotte nodded. "I couldn't sleep. Too much energy in the air. The storm's going to be a big one." Marcus moved to the window and checked the lock on the French doors. "Everything's secure, though." The kettle whistled, and Charlotte poured hot water over her chamomile tea bag. The familiar ritual calmed her. "Would you like some tea?" she asked without thinking. Marcus paused. "That's kind, but I should probably—" Thunder cracked overhead, much closer than before. Charlotte jumped, her mug rattling against the counter. "Actually," Marcus said, "tea sounds nice." Charlotte pulled out another mug, this one plain white. As she prepared Marcus's tea, rain began pattering against the windows. "Do you take anything in it?" she asked. "Just as it is, thank you." They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island, holding their warm mugs as the storm built outside. The string of pendant lights over the island cast a soft, golden glow that made the space feel cozy and separate from the world. "I've always loved storms," Charlotte said, watching lightning flicker through the clouds. "But they make me feel restless." "I know what you mean. All that power in the air makes everything seem possible." Charlotte looked at him over her mug. "What kind of music do you like?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Classical mostly, some jazz. What about you?" "Piano, Chopin especially. Something about the way his pieces feel like conversations with yourself." Marcus smiled. "My grandmother would have liked you. She played piano. Nothing fancy, just hymns and old songs, but she had a way of making them sound like stories." "She sounds wonderful." "She was. She's the one who taught me to pay attention to people, to really listen." Charlotte felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the tea. "I've never been very good at talking to people. I mean, I can do the social things, charity events, dinner parties, but really talking—" "You're talking now." "That's different. You're—" Charlotte searched for the right word. "Safe." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Not discomfort exactly, but a heightened awareness. "Charlotte," he said carefully. Thunder crashed directly overhead, and the lights flickered. Charlotte startled, her mug slipping. Marcus reached across the island to steady it, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was brief, but Charlotte felt it like a spark. They both went very still. "I should probably—" Marcus began. "I've never been kissed," Charlotte said suddenly. Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry?" Heat flooded Charlotte's cheeks, but she'd started, so she might as well finish. "I mean, I have, technically, but never by someone I chose. Never by someone who asked." Marcus set down his mug carefully. "Charlotte, Graham kissed me once, at a Christmas party. Just assumed he could. And there have been others who thought they had the right because of who my family is, or because we'd been introduced, or because they'd bought me dinner." Charlotte's voice was steady, matter of fact. "But I've never kissed someone I actually wanted to kiss." The rain hammered harder against the windows. Marcus was very quiet, very still. "I'm not telling you this to make you uncomfortable," Charlotte continued. "I'm telling you because you listen, and because you ask permission for things, and because I trust you." Lightning flashed, illuminating the garden beyond the windows. In that brief, bright moment, Charlotte saw Marcus's expression clearly. Surprise, concern, and something deeper. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "I work for your family. I know. I'm supposed to protect you, not—" He ran a hand over his hair. "This isn't appropriate. Asking permission isn't appropriate?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "That's not what I meant." Another flash of lightning, another rumble of thunder. The lights flickered again, longer this time. "May I?" Charlotte asked, so quietly she wasn't sure he'd heard her over the storm. But Marcus went very still. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He moved around the island slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When he reached her, he stopped just close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "If you're sure," he whispered. Charlotte lifted her chin, and Marcus leaned down. The kiss was gentle, careful, questioning. His lips were soft and warm, and when Charlotte responded, she felt him relax slightly. It lasted perhaps 10 seconds. When they broke apart, they were both breathing a little fast. "Oh," Charlotte said. Marcus stepped back, running both hands over his hair now. "We shouldn't have—" "I asked," Charlotte said firmly. "And you asked. That's how it should be. Your mother doesn't get to decide who I kiss." Marcus looked at her with something like wonder. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Before Charlotte could answer, the lights flickered again and went out completely. In the darkness, Charlotte heard Marcus move. A moment later, the soft glow of his phone's flashlight appeared. "Emergency lighting is in the pantry," Charlotte said. "I'll get it." "I'll get it. You stay here." But Charlotte was already moving toward the pantry door. "Marcus, I live here. I know where everything is." She found the battery-powered lantern on the second shelf and flicked it on. Warm light filled the kitchen, steadier than the phone's glare. When she turned around, Marcus was standing exactly where she'd left him, watching her with a careful expression. "We need to talk about this," he said. "Yes, we do." They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the lantern between them like a small campfire. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside felt peaceful. "I could lose my job," Marcus said quietly. "I won't let that happen." "Charlotte, you don't understand. If your mother thinks I've crossed a line—" "Have you?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Yes, probably." "Good." He looked at her sharply. "Good?" "Some lines are worth crossing." Charlotte leaned forward. "But I don't want you to be uncomfortable. And I don't want to put you in an impossible situation." "Then what do you want?" Charlotte considered this carefully. "I want to know that what just happened was real, that it mattered. And I want to figure out how to be honest about this without destroying everything." Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay, then we set some boundaries, clear ones." "Such as?" "No physical contact unless it's for safety reasons. We maintain professional protocol during work hours. And if this becomes a problem for either of us, we tell Devin immediately." "And after work hours?" "I don't have after work hours when I'm on your detail." Charlotte felt her heart sink a little. "Right. But," Marcus said, "maybe we can figure something out. Carefully." The lights flickered back on, sudden and bright after the gentle glow of the lantern. Charlotte blinked in the harsh kitchen lighting, feeling like they'd been pulled back into the real world too quickly. "I should do a sweep," Marcus said, standing. "Make sure the storm didn't cause any problems." Charlotte nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of what had just happened. "Marcus?" He paused at the doorway. "Thank you for asking, for being careful with me." His smile was soft and real. "Thank you for trusting me." After he left, Charlotte sat alone in the bright kitchen, touching her lips with her fingertips. She felt different. Older, maybe. More herself. She also felt terrified. But as she turned off the lights and headed upstairs, she realized the fear wasn't about what had happened. It was about what might happen next. And for the first time in her life, that possibility excited her more than it scared her. Tomorrow, she would have to figure out how to look at Marcus across breakfast and pretend her world hadn't shifted. Tomorrow, she would have to navigate her mother's watchful eyes and maintain professional distance. But tonight, she fell asleep with the memory of gentle hands and a voice that asked permission, and she dreamed of storms that brought light instead of darkness. The next morning felt different from the moment Charlotte opened her eyes. She lay in bed for a few extra minutes, remembering the storm, the kitchen, the way Marcus had asked permission before kissing her. Her fingers touched her lips absently. She could still feel the gentleness of it, the way he'd given her time to change her mind. By 7:15, she was dressed and waiting in the foyer. When the doorbell rang at exactly 7:30, her heart jumped. But when she opened the door, there were two men standing on her front step. "Good morning, Charlotte," Marcus said, his voice carefully professional. "I'd like you to meet Luis Santos. He'll be joining your security team." Luis was shorter than Marcus, with graying hair and kind eyes. He wore a similar navy suit and offered Charlotte a respectful nod. "Ms. Hale, it's a pleasure to meet you." Charlotte's stomach dropped. "Joining?" "Additional coverage," Marcus explained, not quite meeting her eyes. "Your mother requested expanded protection." Of course she had. "I see," Charlotte said quietly. The drive to her morning appointment felt completely different with Luis in the front passenger seat and Marcus behind the wheel. The easy conversation from the day before was gone, replaced by polite distance and careful professionalism. Charlotte stared out the window, trying not to feel hurt. This was probably for the best. Last night had been a moment of storm-induced madness. This was reality. At the art gallery where Charlotte served on the board, Luis handled the door while Marcus surveyed the surroundings. They moved like a well-oiled machine, efficient and impersonal. "Your security seems very thorough," commented Mrs. Patterson, the gallery director. "Are you having some kind of trouble, dear?" "Just a precaution," Charlotte said with a smile that felt fake. She caught Marcus watching her in his peripheral vision, but when their eyes met, his expression was neutral, professional. The meeting dragged on for 2 hours. When they finally left, Charlotte felt drained in a way that had nothing to do with discussing fundraising strategies. "Where to next?" Marcus asked as they settled back into the car. "Home, please." The drive back was quiet except for the low murmur of Luis and Marcus discussing route options and timing. Charlotte felt like a package being delivered, precious but not particularly human. When they pulled into the townhouse driveway, Eleanor was waiting at the front door with a satisfied expression. "How did the new arrangement work out?" she asked as Charlotte walked past. "Fine," Charlotte said without stopping. She spent the rest of the day in her room, reading and trying not to think about how quickly everything had changed. 3 days later, Charlotte was beginning to adjust to the new normal. Luis and Marcus worked together seamlessly, taking turns with different responsibilities. Marcus drove, Luis handled doors and packages. They rotated who stayed closer during events. It was professional, effective, completely impersonal. Charlotte was leaving a charity luncheon on Friday afternoon when everything changed. They were stopped at a red light on a quiet side street when Charlotte heard the squeal of brakes behind them. She turned to look through the rear window just as a small sedan bumped into them. It wasn't hard, barely a tap, but Charlotte felt herself tense. "Everyone okay?" Marcus asked immediately, his eyes finding Charlotte's in the rearview mirror. "Fine," she said, though her heart was racing. "I'm good," Luis confirmed. Marcus pulled to the curb and put the car in park. "Stay here while I assess the situation." He got out to examine the damage and speak with the other driver, a young woman who looked mortified and kept apologizing. Through the window, Charlotte watched Marcus handle everything with calm efficiency. He took photos of both cars. He exchanged insurance information. He called Devon to report the incident and Eleanor to let her know what had happened, all while keeping one eye on the car where Charlotte waited. "Your guy's good," Luis observed. "A lot of people would be angry about this." Charlotte nodded, watching Marcus comfort the crying woman who'd hit them. Even in an unexpected situation, his first instinct was kindness. When Marcus returned to the car 15 minutes later, Charlotte felt herself relax for the first time since the impact. "Minor damage to the bumper," he reported. "Her insurance will cover it. Are you sure you're feeling all right?" "I'm fine. You handled that perfectly." In the rearview mirror, their eyes met and held for just a moment longer than necessary. Charlotte saw something warm and real in his expression before he looked away. "Just doing my job," he said quietly. But Charlotte knew it was more than that. The way he'd checked on everyone first, the way he'd been gentle with the upset driver, the way he'd stayed calm under pressure, that was just who Marcus was. She was beginning to understand that her feelings from that stormy night weren't going away. The next afternoon, Marcus had to make a quick stop at his apartment to change his tie. A coffee spill during lunch had left him looking unprofessional, and Charlotte's evening event required formal attire. "This will just take 5 minutes," he said as they pulled up to a modest apartment building in a tree-lined neighborhood. "Take your time," Charlotte said. Luis stayed with the car while Marcus disappeared inside. Charlotte looked around at the quiet street, the small front gardens, the porch swings on several of the buildings. It was so different from her world of townhouses and doormen and private drives. This felt real. When Marcus emerged wearing a fresh shirt and different tie, he paused on the small front porch to lock his door. "Nice neighborhood," Charlotte commented when he returned to the car. "I like it. Quiet, but not isolated." "Do you know your neighbors?" Marcus smiled slightly. "Mrs. Chen next door brings me soup when she thinks I'm working too much. The family upstairs has twin toddlers who like to play superhero at 6 in the morning." Charlotte tried to picture Marcus's daily life, coming home to this peaceful street, chatting with Mrs. Chen, listening to children's laughter through his ceiling. "It sounds wonderful," she said, meaning it. "It's home." Something in his voice made Charlotte look at him more carefully. There was contentment there, but also a kind of loneliness. "Do you ever think about getting married? Having a family?" The question slipped out before Charlotte could stop it. Luis cleared his throat softly from the front seat. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I'd like to, someday, when I find the right person." "What would the right person be like?" Another long pause. "Someone honest. Someone brave enough to say what they really think. Marcus met her eyes in the mirror. Someone worth protecting. Charlotte's breath caught. They were talking about security and relationships and daily life. But underneath it all was the memory of a storm and a gentle kiss and the knowledge that they were both pretending this was just a professional conversation. "We should head to your event," Marcus said finally. "Right," Charlotte said. "Yes." But as they drove through the city, Charlotte found herself thinking about porch swings and neighborly soup and what it might feel like to come home to someone who chose to be there. That evening, Charlotte's cousin Tessa called. "You sound different," Tessa said without preamble. "What's going on?" Charlotte was lying on her bed staring at the ceiling. She'd gotten through the charity dinner successfully, with Marcus and Luis maintaining their professional distance while keeping her safe from awkward conversations and unwanted attention. "Nothing's going on," Charlotte said. "Liar, you sound, I don't know, awake." Charlotte rolled over onto her stomach. "I hired a bodyguard." "About time. Is he terrifying?" "No, he's—" Charlotte searched for the right word. "Careful." "Careful how?" "He asks permission for things. He listens when I talk. He treats me like I have a brain." "Ah," Tessa said knowingly. "You like him." "Tessa." "You do. Oh my God, you like your bodyguard. This is better than a romance novel." "It's not like that," Charlotte protested, but her voice sounded weak even to herself. "Uh-huh. What's he look like?" Charlotte closed her eyes, seeing Marcus clearly. "Tall, brown eyes. He has this smile that makes you feel like you're the only person in the room." "And?" "And nothing. He works for my family. It's complicated." "The best things usually are," Tessa said gently. "What does your gut tell you?" Charlotte thought about the storm, the kiss, the way Marcus had looked at her after the car accident. "That I'm in trouble," she admitted. "Good trouble or bad trouble?" "I don't know yet." After they hung up, Charlotte lay awake thinking about Marcus's apartment building, his quiet street, his neighbors who cared about him. She thought about the way he'd handled the accident with such calm competence. The way he'd asked permission before kissing her. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. Tomorrow, she would see him again. They would maintain professional distance and pretend that nothing had changed. But something had changed. Charlotte could feel it in her chest, warm and frightening and real. She was falling for Marcus Reed, and she had no idea what to do about it. Monday morning brought rain and an uncomfortable conversation. Charlotte was having breakfast when Eleanor joined her at the small table in the morning room. "I had an interesting phone call from Devin Patel on Friday," Eleanor said, settling into her chair with her coffee. Charlotte's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Oh?" "He mentioned that you and Marcus seem to have developed quite a rapport." "We work well together," Charlotte said carefully. "I'm sure you do, but Devin was wondering if perhaps the arrangement has become too familiar." Charlotte set down her fork. "What does that mean?" "It means that your security team should maintain appropriate professional distance. You're not friends with Marcus, Charlotte. He's an employee." The word stung more than Charlotte had expected. "He's also a human being who treats me with respect." "Of course. But there's a difference between respect and familiarity." Eleanor's blue eyes were sharp. "I don't want there to be any confusion about boundaries." "There isn't any confusion." Eleanor studied her daughter's face. "Good, because I've asked Devin to assign an additional team member and rotate responsibilities more frequently. Charlotte's heart sank. Why? Because you seem very comfortable with Marcus. Sometimes too much comfort can lead to complications. Before Charlotte could respond, the doorbell rang. Through the window, she could see Marcus waiting on the front step, right on time as always. "We'll finish this conversation later," Eleanor said, standing. "For now, please remember what we discussed." Charlotte nodded numbly and went to get her purse. When she opened the front door, Marcus took one look at her face and frowned slightly. "Everything all right?" "Fine," Charlotte said, but her voice came out too bright. "Ready to go?" During the drive to her first appointment, Charlotte stared out the window and tried not to think about what her mother had said. Marcus was just doing his job. She was reading too much into small kindnesses and professional courtesy. The kiss had been a mistake, a moment of storm-induced madness that meant nothing. But when she caught his eyes in the rearview mirror, she saw concern there. Real worry about her mood, her comfort, her well-being. That wasn't just professional courtesy. "Charlotte," Marcus said quietly. "Yes? If something's wrong, you can tell me." The simple offer broke something loose in Charlotte's chest. Here he was, worried about her feelings, even while maintaining the exact professional distance her mother had demanded. "My mother thinks we've become too familiar," Charlotte said. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Have we?" "Yes," Charlotte said honestly, "but I don't think that's necessarily bad." "Your mother might disagree." "My mother disagrees with most things that make me happy." Another silence, longer this time. "What do you want to do about it?" Marcus asked finally. Charlotte looked at his reflection in the window. "I want to be honest about what's happening between us." "That could be complicated." "Most worthwhile things are." Marcus turned onto Charlotte's street, driving slowly as if reluctant to end the conversation. "If we're going to be honest," he said, "then I should tell you that Friday night keeps replaying in my head. The storm, the kitchen, the way you asked permission." Charlotte's breath caught. "It does?" "It does, and I should also tell you that's not professional at all." "Good," Charlotte said, "because I've been thinking about it too." They sat in the parked car for a moment, the engine running, both of them processing what they'd just admitted. "So what now?" Charlotte asked. Marcus turned to look at her properly. "Now we figure out how to be careful, how to be honest without destroying everything." "Can we do that?" "I don't know, but I'd like to try." Charlotte felt a smile tug at the corners of her mouth. "So would I." It wasn't a solution. It wasn't even a plan. But it was an acknowledgement of something real between them, something worth protecting. As they walked to the building together, Charlotte felt lighter than she had in days. They were going to figure this out. Carefully, honestly, together. She had no idea how much more complicated things were about to become. 3 days later, everything fell apart. Charlotte was in the back garden that evening, reading by the string lights Eleanor had installed for her 21st birthday. It was a warm night, peaceful and quiet, with the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. She'd barely seen Marcus alone since their conversation in the car. Louise had been taking more of the driving shifts, and Eleanor seemed to appear whenever Charlotte and Marcus were in the same room for more than a few minutes. But tonight, Eleanor was at her book club, and Louise had gone home after the dinner shift. Charlotte heard the kitchen door open behind her. "Final security check," Marcus said softly. "Everything's peaceful out here," Charlotte replied, not looking up from her book. Marcus moved quietly around the garden's perimeter, checking the gate latch and the motion sensor lights. When he finished, instead of going back inside, he sat on the garden bench a few feet from Charlotte's chair. "Good book?" he asked. Charlotte closed it and showed him the cover. "Poetry. Probably boring to most people." "I like poetry. What kind?" "Mary Oliver. She writes about nature, about paying attention to small things." "Read me something?" Charlotte opened the book and found one of her favorites. "Listen, are you breathing just a little and calling it a life?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's beautiful and a little terrifying." "The best poetry usually is." Charlotte looked at him in the soft light. "Do you feel like you're breathing just a little?" "Sometimes. My job is about watching, protecting, staying alert. There's not much room for living." "What would living look like?" Marcus leaned back against the bench, considering the question. "Sleeping in on Sunday mornings, taking walks without checking sightlines, having conversations that don't end when someone else enters the room." "Those sound like good things?" "They do." Marcus looked at her. "What about you? What would living look like?" Charlotte thought about her scheduled days, her managed interactions, her careful public persona. "Choosing what I want to do instead of what I'm supposed to do. Saying no without having to explain myself. Kissing someone because I want to, not because it's expected." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. "Charlotte," Marcus said carefully. "I know, we can't. But sitting here, talking like this, it feels like living." "It does." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the city sounds beyond the garden walls. Charlotte felt the same sense of possibility she'd experienced during the storm, as if the normal rules didn't apply in this small, lit space. "Marcus?" "Yeah?" "May I kiss you again?" Marcus turned to look at her fully. In the soft light, his expression was serious, but not resistant. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." This time, when Marcus moved closer, it was unhurried. He cupped Charlotte's face gently in his hands, giving her time to change her mind. "If you're sure," he whispered. "I'm sure." The kiss was longer this time, deeper. Charlotte felt herself melt into it, into the warmth and gentleness and rightness of it. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "We're in trouble," Marcus said against her forehead. "I know." "Your mother?" "We'll have to deal with it." Marcus pulled back to look at her. "Charlotte, you don't understand. I could lose my job. You could lose your security. There are protocols." "Then we'll be careful. We'll figure it out." "How?" Before Charlotte could answer, the kitchen door clicked open. They sprang apart as Eleanor stepped into the garden, her book club bag in hand and a shocked expression on her face. "What?" she said in a voice like ice. "Is going on here?" Charlotte's stomach dropped to her shoes. Marcus stood up quickly, his professional mask sliding back into place. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "I was just finishing." "I can see what you were finishing." Eleanor's eyes moved between them, taking in their guilty expressions, their slightly disheveled appearance. "Charlotte, go inside, now." "Mother." "Now." Charlotte looked at Marcus, who nodded slightly. With a sinking heart, she gathered her book and went into the house. Through the kitchen window, she could see Eleanor and Marcus talking in the garden. Eleanor was gesturing sharply. Marcus stood perfectly still, taking whatever she was saying to him. Charlotte knew, with terrible certainty, that everything was about to change. The next morning, Charlotte woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. A text from an unknown number. "This is Dev Patel. Please be ready by 9 a.m. for a meeting at my office. Marcus will drive you. Charlotte's hands shook as she read the message. This was it. This was the consequence of last night's kiss. Last night's honesty. She dressed carefully in her most conservative outfit. Navy suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. If this was going to be a professional discussion about professional boundaries, she would look the part. Marcus was waiting in the car at exactly 9 o'clock. He looked tired, as if he'd slept as little as she had. "Good morning," he said formally. "Good morning." The drive to Devon's office was silent, except for the radio playing softly. Charlotte stared out the window and tried to prepare herself for what was coming. Devon's office was on the 3rd floor of a sleek downtown building. The waiting area was all glass and leather, designed to impress corporate clients. Devon Patel was younger than Charlotte had expected, maybe 38, with kind eyes and an expensive suit. He greeted them both professionally and ushered them into a conference room. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to chairs across from each other at the polished table. Charlotte sat, hyper-aware of Marcus across from her, both of them trying to look anywhere but at each other. "I had an interesting conversation with your mother last night," Devon began. "She's expressed some concerns about the current security arrangement." Charlotte's throat felt tight. "What kind of concerns?" "She feels that professional boundaries may have been compromised." Devon's voice was careful, neutral. "She's requesting that Marcus be reassigned to a different client." The words hit Charlotte like a physical blow. "Reassigned? Effective at the end of the week. We'll transition you to a new team leader, someone with excellent credentials and experience." Charlotte looked at Marcus. His face was perfectly composed, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "What if I don't want a new team leader?" Charlotte asked. "I understand this might be an adjustment," Devon said. "But your mother is paying for this service, and her concerns are valid. Maintaining professional distance is crucial in this type of work." "So that's it? Marcus is being punished because my mother thinks we're too friendly?" "Marcus isn't being punished. He's being reassigned. There's a difference." Charlotte felt anger building in her chest. "And what if I refuse?" Devon looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Hale, I hope that won't be necessary. Marcus is a valued employee, and this situation isn't anyone's fault. Sometimes these things just develop." "These things," Charlotte repeated. "Familiarity between client and security personnel? It's more common than you might think." Charlotte finally looked directly at Marcus. His dark eyes met hers across the table, and she saw resignation there. He'd already accepted this. "Fine," she said quietly. "When does the transition happen?" "Marcus will finish out this week. Your new team leader starts Monday." Charlotte nodded, not trusting her voice. "Is there anything else?" Devon asked. "No," Marcus said. "I think we're done here." As they left the building, Charlotte felt numb. 5 days. She had 5 more days with Marcus, and then he would disappear from her life as suddenly as he'd entered it. "I'm sorry," she said as they reached the car. "Don't be. This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "Charlotte." Marcus stopped walking and looked at her. "None of this is your fault. We both made choices. Choices that cost you your job. Choices that were worth making." Charlotte stared at him, this man who'd treated her with such respect, such care. In 5 days, he would be gone, and she would go back to being managed and protected and controlled. "This isn't over," she said. "Charlotte, it isn't. I won't let them decide my life for me anymore." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out." As they drove back to the townhouse, Charlotte stared out the window and made herself a promise. She was done being a passenger in her own life. Charlotte didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the meeting with Devon over and over in her mind. 5 days. In 5 days, Marcus would be gone, reassigned to protect someone else. Someone whose family didn't think he was too familiar. At 2 in the morning, she got up and paced to her window. The street below was empty and quiet. Somewhere across the city, Marcus was probably lying awake too, thinking about the end of this assignment, the end of whatever had been growing between them. Charlotte pulled out her phone and started typing a dozen different texts, then deleted them all. What could she say? I'm sorry my mother saw us kissing. I'm sorry you're losing your job because of me. I'm sorry I'm too much of a coward to fight for what I want. That last thought stopped her cold. Was that what she was? A coward? She thought about the past few weeks with Marcus, how he'd asked her opinion about everything, how he'd treated her like her thoughts and feelings mattered, how he'd waited for her permission before kissing her, both times. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her as more than just Eleanor Hale's daughter, or the family fortune, or a pretty face to be managed and protected. Marcus had seen her as Charlotte, just Charlotte, and she was going to let her mother take that away without a fight? Charlotte sat down at her desk and pulled out a piece of paper. If she was going to do this, she needed to think it through carefully. She started writing. By dawn, she had covered 3 pages with notes, arguments, and the speech she planned to give. She'd crossed out line after line, rewritten whole paragraphs, and finally settled on something that felt true and brave and terrifying. When her alarm went off at 7, Charlotte was already dressed and ready. She was done being managed. Eleanor was having coffee in the morning room when Charlotte found her. "Good morning, darling," Eleanor said without looking up from her newspaper. "I trust you slept well?" "Actually, I didn't sleep at all." Eleanor glanced up, taking in Charlotte's determined expression and the papers in her hand. "Oh? I need to talk to you, and I need you to really listen." Eleanor set down her coffee cup with a small clink. "Charlotte, if this is about last night..." "It is." Charlotte sat down across from her mother, placing her notes on the table. "And it's about a lot more than that." "I don't think..." "Please." Charlotte's voice was firm. "Let me finish." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. Charlotte took a deep breath and began. "I'm 25 years old, and I've never made a real decision about my own life. You've chosen my schools, my activities, my social circle, even my security team. And I let you because I thought that was how families like ours worked." "Charlotte, I'm not finished." Charlotte looked down at her notes, then back up at her mother. "But Marcus treated me differently. He asked what I wanted. He listened when I spoke. He made me feel like I had a brain and opinions that mattered. That's what I'm concerned about," Eleanor said carefully. "You've become too attached." "I've become myself," Charlotte interrupted. "For the first time in my life, I've felt like myself. And yes, I have feelings for Marcus, real feelings. And he has feelings for me, too." Eleanor's face tightened. "Charlotte, you don't understand the implications." "I understand that you're afraid of what people will think. I understand that this isn't the neat, controllable relationship you planned for me with someone like Graham." Charlotte leaned forward. "But I don't care anymore about what people think." "You should care. Our family name is not more important than my happiness." The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor stared at her daughter as if seeing a stranger. "You're being naive," Eleanor said finally. "You think love is enough? You think good intentions erase the practical realities of different backgrounds, different social circles? I think honesty and respect are a good foundation for anything." Charlotte's voice stayed steady. "Marcus has shown me more respect in 3 weeks than Graham has in 3 years. Graham is from a good family. Graham doesn't listen when I say no." Eleanor went very still. "What do you mean?" "I mean he pushes and assumes and acts like my preferences don't matter because he's decided we're a good match on paper." Charlotte met her mother's eyes. "Marcus has never once made me feel like I owed him anything. He's never once ignored what I wanted." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "Even if that's true," she said finally, "there are other considerations. His job, the appearance of impropriety." "Then we'll figure it out. Together. But I won't let you fire him for treating me with kindness." "Charlotte, I've already spoken with Devon. Then you can speak with him again." Charlotte picked up her phone. "In fact, let's all speak with him. Together. Right now." Eleanor blinked. "Right now?" "Right now." Charlotte was already dialing. "Devon, it's Charlotte Hale. I need to request an emergency meeting this morning. Yes, with my mother and Marcus present. 9:30? We'll be there." She hung up and looked at her mother. "Charlotte, what are you doing?" "I'm fighting for something that matters to me." Charlotte stood up. "For the first time in my life." An hour later, they were all sitting in Devon's conference room again. Eleanor looked uncomfortable and disapproving. Marcus looked confused and wary. Devon looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Thank you all for coming," Charlotte began before anyone else could speak. "I asked for this meeting because I have something to say, and I need everyone to hear it." She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "Marcus is being reassigned because my mother thinks our professional relationship has become too personal." She's right. It has. But not in the way she thinks. Marcus shifted in his chair but didn't speak. "Marcus has never been inappropriate with me. He has never violated any boundary or made me uncomfortable. What he has done is treat me like an adult, capable of making my own decisions." "Charlotte," Eleanor began. "I'm not finished." Charlotte's voice was calm but unmovable. "I have feelings for Marcus. Real feelings. And I believe he has feelings for me too. I won't pretend otherwise, and I won't apologize for it." Devon cleared his throat. "Ms. Hale, I appreciate your honesty, but there are professional standards." "Which is why I'm here," Charlotte said. "I want to find a solution that works for everyone. Marcus shouldn't lose his job because we care about each other." "What kind of solution?" Devon asked carefully. Charlotte took a breath. This was the scary part. "Remove Marcus from my security detail. Assign him to other clients. But don't fire him. And off duty, as private citizens, we should be free to see each other if we choose to." Eleanor's face had gone pale. "Charlotte, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." Marcus finally spoke. "Charlotte, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." She looked at him directly. "I won't pretend I don't care about you to make other people comfortable." The room was silent for a long moment. Devon leaned back in his chair, thinking. "That's actually not unreasonable. If Marcus steps off your detail, there's no conflict of interest. What happens in his personal time is his business." "Within reason," Eleanor said quickly. "There would still be appearances to consider, family reputation, which we would handle discreetly and respectfully," Charlotte said. "We're not asking to make a public spectacle. We're asking for the right to get to know each other as private citizens." Devin looked between them all. "I'd need to run this by my legal team, but I don't see any policy violations if Marcus is reassigned." "How quickly could that happen?" Charlotte asked. "Give me 5 minutes to make some calls." Devin left the room, leaving Charlotte, Eleanor, and Marcus sitting in tense silence. "I can't believe you're doing this," Eleanor said finally. "I can't believe I waited this long," Charlotte replied. Eleanor looked at Marcus. "And you? Are you really willing to risk your professional reputation for this?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Mrs. Hale, your daughter is the most honest, brave person I've ever met. If she's willing to fight for this, then yes, I'm willing to risk it." Eleanor studied his face. "You really care about her." "I do. And this isn't about money or social status or—" "No, ma'am. It's about Charlotte." Something in Eleanor's expression softened slightly. When Devin returned, he was carrying a folder. "Okay," he said, sitting down. "Here's what I can offer. Marcus finishes this week on Charlotte's detail, 3 more days. Starting Monday, he's reassigned to other clients. His employment record stays clean. Outside of work hours, what he does is his business." Charlotte felt her heart leap. "Really?" "Really. But," Devin held up a hand, "this stays discreet. No publicity, no drama. And if there are any complications down the road, we revisit the arrangement." "Agreed," Charlotte said, quickly. "Marcus?" Devin looked at him. "Agreed." They all turned to Eleanor, who sat quietly for a long moment. "Fine," she said finally. "But I want regular check-ins, and the first sign of any scandal or embarrassment—" "There won't be any," Charlotte said firmly. Eleanor nodded slowly. "Then I suppose we have an arrangement." Devin slid papers across the table. "I'll need everyone to sign off on the new terms." As Charlotte signed her name, she felt lighter than she had in days. They'd done it. They'd found a way to be honest without destroying everything. When they left the building, Eleanor walked ahead, while Charlotte and Marcus trailed behind. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "For what?" "For fighting. For being brave enough to say what you wanted." Charlotte smiled. "For the first time in my life, I had something worth fighting for." The next 3 days passed in a strange mix of anticipation and melancholy. Everyone knew it was an ending, but also a beginning. Marcus maintained perfect professionalism during their last drives together. But Charlotte caught him watching her in the rearview mirror with soft eyes, and sometimes their conversations lingered a few moments longer than necessary. On Tuesday, they stopped at a small coffee shop Charlotte had mentioned liking. While Marcus ordered their drinks, Charlotte bought him a plain croissant from the pastry case. "Thank you," he said, surprised. "You mentioned once that you liked them." When she tried to wave away his offer of money, Marcus insisted on giving her the exact change. "Habit," he said with a small smile, "keeping things fair." On Wednesday, their last day together, they drove Charlotte's usual routes one final time. The new security team would take over tomorrow, 2 experienced guards who came highly recommended, but weren't Marcus. "Will you miss this?" Charlotte asked as they sat in traffic. "Parts of it," Marcus said. "Which parts?" "Our conversations. The way you say good morning like you actually mean it. That little smile you get when you're thinking about something funny." Charlotte felt her cheeks warm. "I'll miss your terrible jokes about traffic patterns." "They're not terrible. They're educational." "They're terrible." Marcus laughed, and Charlotte memorized the sound. That evening, as Marcus did his final security check of the townhouse, Charlotte felt the weight of tomorrow's change. "This isn't goodbye," she said when he finished. No, Marcus agreed. This is just... See you later. How much later? Marcus smiled. How about Saturday? There's a nice little restaurant in my neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just good food and quiet conversation. I'd like that. 7 o'clock? Perfect. After Marcus left, Charlotte sat in the garden where they'd shared their second kiss. In 3 days, she'd stood up to her mother, fought for what she wanted, and changed the entire course of her life. She felt terrified and exhilarated and proud of herself, but mostly she felt hopeful. Friday afternoon, Charlotte was reading in the sitting room when Eleanor appeared in the doorway. Charlotte, could I speak with you for a moment? Charlotte looked up, surprised by her mother's tentative tone. Of course. Eleanor sat down across from her, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I owe you an apology, Eleanor said. Charlotte blinked. You do? I've been thinking about what you said in that meeting. About Marcus treating you with respect. About Graham not listening when you say no. Eleanor's hands twisted in her lap. I realize I may have been so focused on what I thought was best for you that I forgot to ask what you actually wanted. Mom? I hired Marcus to protect you from men who might hurt you. And then, I tried to fire him for being exactly the kind of man you deserve. Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes. You were just worried about me. I was worried about appearances, about control, about losing my little girl. Eleanor reached across and touched Charlotte's hand. But you're not a little girl anymore. You're a grown woman who's capable of making her own choices. Even when those choices scare you? Eleanor smiled sadly. Especially when those choices scare me. They sat quietly for a moment. Do you really care about him? Eleanor asked. I do. And he cares about you? I think so. Eleanor nodded. Then I suppose I should get to know him better. Not as your bodyguard, but as whatever he becomes to you. Charlotte squeezed her mother's hand. Thank you. Just promise me you'll be careful. Not because I don't trust him, but because I love you. I promise. That evening, Charlotte watched from her window as Eleanor walked in the garden with Marcus. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see her mother's posture gradually relax as they talked. When Marcus left 20 minutes later, Eleanor came to find Charlotte. Well? Charlotte asked. He's a good man, Eleanor said simply. And he loves you. He told you that? He didn't have to. It's written all over his face when he looks at you. Eleanor smiled. Just like yours is when you look at him. Charlotte felt a warm glow spread through her chest. So, you're okay with this? Really okay? I'm learning to be, Eleanor said. And Charlotte, I'm proud of you for fighting for what you want, even when it meant fighting me. Saturday evening, Charlotte stood in front of her mirror, changing outfits for the third time. She'd settled on a simple blue dress, not too formal, not too casual, just right for a first real date at a neighborhood restaurant. At 6:45, she walked the 6 blocks to Marcus's apartment building. The evening was warm and soft, and Charlotte felt her nervousness transform into excitement as she got closer. Marcus was waiting on his front porch, wearing dark jeans and a button-down shirt that brought out his eyes. When he saw her coming up the sidewalk, his face lit up with a smile that made Charlotte's heart race. You look beautiful, he said, standing up. You look pretty good yourself. They walked to the restaurant together, and Charlotte marveled at how different this felt from being driven everywhere. This felt normal, real. The restaurant was small and cozy, with mismatched chairs and soft lighting from table lamps instead of overhead fixtures. The menu was handwritten on a chalkboard, and the whole place smelled like garlic and fresh bread. "This is perfect," Charlotte said as they settled into a corner booth. "I hoped you'd like it." They ordered simple food, pasta for Charlotte, fish for Marcus, and talked about everything except security protocols and professional boundaries. Marcus told her about his grandmother's garden, about learning to cook from his aunt, about the book he was reading about urban beekeeping. Charlotte told him about her secret love of terrible reality TV shows, about the short story she'd been trying to write for 2 years, about her dream of maybe teaching someday. Halfway through dinner, Tessa appeared at their table. "Sorry to interrupt," she said with a grin. "I was just walking by and saw you two through the window." "Tessa, this is Marcus," Charlotte said, unable to suppress her smile. "Marcus, my cousin Tessa." "The one who's been making Charlotte smile so much lately," Tessa said, shaking Marcus's hand. "Nice to finally meet you properly." They chatted for a few minutes, and Charlotte watched Marcus handle Tessa's gentle interrogation with humor and grace. "I like him," Tessa announced finally. "Don't mess this up, cousin." After Tessa left, Charlotte shook her head in embarrassment. "She's protective," Charlotte explained. "Good," Marcus said. "You should have people who care about you." When they finished eating, they walked slowly back toward Marcus's building, neither of them eager for the evening to end. "Thank you for dinner," Charlotte said as they reached his front porch. "Thank you for taking a chance on this. On us." Charlotte looked up at him in the soft glow of the porch light. "Marcus?" "Yeah?" "May I kiss you? For real this time? Not because there's a storm or because we're sneaking around, but just because I want to." Marcus's smile was soft and real and completely hers. "I'd like nothing more." This kiss was different from their others. Unhurried, certain, with no audience but the stars. Charlotte felt herself sink into it, into the rightness of being exactly where she wanted to be with exactly who she wanted to be with. When they finally broke apart, they were both a little breathless. "So," Marcus said against her forehead, "what happens now?" "Now we figure it out as we go, together." "I can work with that." Charlotte smiled. "Good, because I have some ideas about what together might look like." "Such as?" "Weekly check-ins about boundaries, no secrets from my mother about the fact that we're dating, and patience as the default setting." Marcus nodded seriously. "Those are good rules. Oh, and one more thing." "What's that?" Charlotte stood on her tiptoes and kissed him again, soft and quick. "More of that," she said. "Definitely more of that." Marcus laughed, and the sound filled Charlotte with joy. "I think I can manage that," he said. 2 weeks later, Charlotte woke up on Saturday morning to sunlight streaming through her windows and the sound of her phone buzzing with a text from Marcus. "Farmer's market today? I promise to buy you the best peaches in the city." Charlotte smiled and typed back, "Only if you also get me coffee and don't complain when I spend 20 minutes picking the perfect flowers." "Deal." "Pick you up at 9? I'll be ready." Charlotte got dressed in jeans and a soft yellow sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. When she came downstairs, Eleanor was in the kitchen reading the newspaper. "Good morning, darling. Off somewhere nice?" "Farmer's market with Marcus." Eleanor looked up and smiled. "That sounds lovely. Will you bring me back some of those little tomatoes if you see any good ones?" "Of course." It was such a normal, easy exchange that Charlotte felt a little amazed. 3 weeks ago, her mother had been trying to fire Marcus for getting too close. Now she was asking Charlotte to pick up vegetables for her while on a date. People could change. families could grow. Marcus arrived exactly on time, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a smile that made Charlotte's whole day brighter. "Ready for the best Saturday morning ever?" he asked, handing her a cup. "Absolutely." They spent 2 hours wandering through the market stalls, sampling peaches and buying flowers and arguing playfully about the merits of different kinds of bread. Marcus knew half the vendors by name, and he introduced Charlotte proudly as "my girlfriend, Charlotte." The word sent a little thrill through her every time. When they got back to Marcus's building, they sat on his front porch, arranging Charlotte's tulips in a chipped ceramic vase Marcus had borrowed from Mrs. Chen. "This is nice," Charlotte said, leaning back against the porch swing. "What is?" "This. Just being together without having to worry about who's watching, or whether we're breaking some rule." Marcus reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together. "It's pretty perfect," he agreed. Charlotte looked at their joined hands, at the flowers bright in the afternoon sun, at Marcus's profile as he watched the neighborhood kids play in the street. She thought about the scared, lonely girl she'd been just a month ago. The girl who let other people make all her decisions, who was afraid to ask for what she wanted, who had never been kissed by someone who asked permission first. That girl seemed like a stranger now. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked. "How much everything has changed." "Good changes?" Charlotte squeezed his hand and smiled. "The best changes." They sat together in comfortable quiet, watching the world go by from their small front porch. Charlotte had never felt so settled, so sure of where she belonged. It wasn't the life her mother had planned for her, or the life she'd thought she was supposed to want. But it was hers, chosen freely, and built on honesty and respect and love. It was exactly what she'd been waiting for, without even knowing she was waiting. "Marcus?" she said. I love you." Marcus turned to look at her, his dark eyes warm and serious and full of wonder. "I love you too," he said simply. And there, on a sunny Saturday afternoon in the most ordinary, perfect moment, Charlotte knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Home wasn't a place. It was a person who asked permission and listened to the answer and loved her enough to fight for the chance to keep loving her. It was this moment, this porch, this man who saw her and chose her every single day. It was enough. It was everything. It was just the beginning. 3 months later, Charlotte stood in her bedroom staring at the invitation in her hands. Cream-colored paper, elegant script, expensive everything. "Mr. and Mrs. Graham Whitford request the pleasure of your company. A wedding." Graham was marrying someone else. Charlotte felt absolutely nothing about it except mild relief. "What's that?" Eleanor asked, appearing in the doorway with a cup of tea. "Graham's wedding invitation." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "How do you feel about that?" Charlotte tossed the invitation onto her dresser. "Grateful that it's not me." Eleanor laughed, settling into the chair by Charlotte's window. "A year ago, you would have said you were fine with marrying him." "A year ago, I didn't know what I actually wanted." "And now you do?" Charlotte thought about Marcus, who was probably just finishing up his morning client. He'd text her soon, asking about lunch plans, and she'd suggest that little sandwich place near his office, where they'd become regulars. "Now I do," she said simply. Eleanor smiled. "Good, because Marcus called earlier, asking if he could take you somewhere special tonight." Charlotte's heart skipped. "Special how?" "He wouldn't say, just asked if 7 o'clock would work." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you'd call him back. But Charlotte?" Eleanor's voice was gentle. "Whatever he's planning, He sounded nervous. Marcus was waiting on the front steps when Charlotte came outside at exactly 7 o'clock. He wore his good navy suit, the one from their first meeting, but he'd loosened the tie slightly. His hands were empty except for his car keys. "Hi," he said, standing up. "Hi yourself. You look nervous." Marcus laughed, running a hand over his hair. "I am nervous." "Why?" "Because tonight matters." He wouldn't say anything else during the drive, despite Charlotte's gentle prodding. They drove through the city as the sun began to set, painting everything in soft gold light. When Marcus pulled into the parking lot of a small community center, Charlotte was completely confused. "Where are we?" "Trust me?" Charlotte looked at the modest brick building with its cheerful yellow doors. "Always." Marcus led her around to the back of the building, where a small garden had been planted between the parking lot and a wooden fence. Someone had strung lights between the trees, and there was a small table set up with 2 chairs and a single white candle. "Marcus," Charlotte breathed. "What is this?" "This is where I volunteer on weekends, teaching self-defense classes to teenage girls." Marcus guided her toward the table. "I wanted to show you a part of my life that matters to me." Charlotte looked around at the simple garden, the string lights, the carefully set table. "It's beautiful. It's not fancy. It's perfect." They sat down, and Marcus pulled a thermos from a bag Charlotte hadn't noticed him carrying. "Mrs. Chen's soup," he said, pouring it into 2 paper cups. "She insisted I bring some when I told her about tonight." Charlotte laughed. "Your neighbor knows about this?" "Mrs. Chen knows about everything. She also wanted me to give you this." Marcus handed her a small, wrapped package. Inside was a delicate bracelet made of silver wire and small blue beads. "She made it herself," Marcus said. "Said every woman needs something beautiful that belongs just to her." Charlotte fastened the bracelet around her wrist, touched by the gesture from a woman she'd only met twice. "I love it, but Marcus, you still haven't told me why we're here." Marcus took a deep breath. "Because I wanted you to see this place, this part of my life, and because I wanted to ask you something important." Charlotte's heart started beating faster. "We've been together for 3 months," Marcus continued. "Real together, not hiding or sneaking around or pretending we don't care about each other." "Best 3 months of my life," Charlotte said softly. "Mine too, and I've been thinking about what comes next." "What comes next?" Marcus reached across the table and took her hands. "I know we're still figuring things out. I know your family situation is complicated, and my job isn't exactly stable, and we come from different worlds." "Marcus, but I also know that I love you. I love your terrible morning hair and the way you hum when you're thinking. I love how brave you are and how you stand up for what matters. I love that you see people, really see them, instead of just looking at their surface." Charlotte felt tears starting in her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "Good," Marcus said, "because I want to build a life with you. A real one. Not just dating and seeing where things go, but actually planning a future together." Charlotte's breath caught. "What kind of future?" "The kind where we wake up in the same place every morning, where we argue about whose turn it is to make coffee and whose turn it is to walk the dog we don't have yet but probably will." Marcus smiled. "The kind where I get to love you every day for the rest of our lives." Charlotte stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" "I'm asking you to marry me." The words hung in the garden air, surrounded by string lights and the scent of jasmine from the fence. Charlotte's hands flew to her mouth. "You're what?" Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black box. Inside was a simple gold band with a single, perfect diamond. "I'm asking you to marry me," he repeated, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "I know it's fast, and I know there will be challenges, but Charlotte, I can't imagine my life without you in it." Charlotte looked at the ring, at Marcus's hopeful face, at the little garden where he spent his weekends teaching young women to protect themselves. "Yes," she said. Marcus blinked. "Yes?" "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. Yes to building a life and arguing about coffee and getting a dog and loving each other forever." Charlotte was crying now, but she was also laughing. "Yes, Marcus, absolutely yes." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly. "How did you know my size?" Charlotte asked through her tears. "I asked Tessa." "You asked Tessa?" "Last week. I also asked your mother for her blessing." Charlotte's eyes went wide. "You did? What did she say?" Marcus smiled. "She said it was about time." They called Eleanor from the car on the way home. "Mom," Charlotte said as soon as Eleanor picked up. "We're engaged." There was a pause, then Eleanor's delighted laugh. "Congratulations, darling. Both of you. Marcus, are you there?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said. "Thank you for your blessing." "Thank you for making my daughter so happy. Now get home so I can see this ring properly." When they arrived at the townhouse, Eleanor was waiting in the foyer with a bottle of champagne and tears in her eyes. "Let me see," she said immediately, taking Charlotte's hand to examine the ring. "It's beautiful," Eleanor said to Marcus. "Simple and classic, perfect for Charlotte." "I hoped you'd approve." "I more than approve, I'm thrilled." Eleanor hugged them both. "Have you thought about timing? A date?" Charlotte looked at Marcus. They hadn't talked about specifics yet. "Soon," Charlotte said. "I don't want to wait." "How soon is soon?" Eleanor asked. "Spring?" Marcus suggested. "Give us time to plan, but not so long that we're waiting forever." "Spring sounds perfect," Charlotte agreed. Eleanor opened the champagne, and they sat in the living room making lists and dreaming out loud about flowers, and venues, and guest lists. "Small wedding?" Charlotte said firmly. "Just family and close friends?" "We could have it here," Eleanor suggested. "In the garden, with the string lights and all the flowers in bloom?" Charlotte looked at Marcus. "What do you think?" "I think anywhere you are is perfect," he said. Eleanor rolled her eyes affectionately. "You two are disgustingly sweet." Charlotte curled up against Marcus's side, admiring her ring in the lamplight. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you really okay with this? All of it? The engagement, the marriage, the fact that I'm choosing a completely different life than you planned?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Charlotte, when you were little, I used to watch you play and wonder what kind of woman you'd become. I had ideas, of course, dreams about the life I thought would make you happy. And I was wrong about what would make you happy. But I wasn't wrong about the woman you became." Eleanor smiled. "You're strong and kind and brave. You stand up for what you believe in, and you love with your whole heart. That's all I ever really wanted for you." Charlotte felt fresh tears starting. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart. Both of you." The next few months passed in a happy blur of planning and preparation. Charlotte moved out of the townhouse and into Marcus's apartment, which felt both terrifying and completely natural. They painted the bedroom a soft blue, bought a small dining table that actually matched and argued good-naturedly about thread counts for new sheets. Marcus quit the security firm and started his own company, specializing in personal safety training and self-defense classes. Charlotte helped him set up his business, using skills she'd never known she had for organizing and planning and dealing with clients. "You're good at this," Marcus said one evening as Charlotte finished updating his website. "At what?" "Running things, making decisions, being in charge." Charlotte looked up from her laptop. "I like it. I never thought I would, but I like having something that's mine." "Want to make it official?" "What do you mean?" Marcus grinned. "Want to be my business partner? We could expand the self-defense classes, maybe add workshops for families, safety seminars for schools." Charlotte stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. You're better at the administrative stuff than I am, and you have a gift for talking to people. We'd make a good team." "We would, wouldn't we?" "The best." Charlotte closed her laptop and moved to sit next to Marcus on the couch. "Yes," she said, "to being business partners and life partners and everything in between." "No second thoughts?" "None." "You?" Marcus kissed her forehead. "Not a single one." Their wedding was everything Charlotte had dreamed of, and nothing like what she thought she wanted. Small and intimate, held in Eleanor's garden on a perfect April morning. Tessa served as maid of honor, wearing a soft pink dress and crying through the entire ceremony. Marcus's best man was Devon, who'd become a genuine friend over the months of business planning. Charlotte wore her grandmother's dress, altered to fit perfectly, with her hair loose and flowers in her hands picked from the garden that morning. Eleanor walked her down the short garden path to where Marcus waited under an archway of white roses and string lights. "You look beautiful," he whispered when she reached him. "So do you." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They'd written their own vows, and Charlotte's voice only shook a little as she promised to love Marcus through whatever came, to build something beautiful together, to choose him every day for the rest of her life. Marcus's vows made everyone cry, including himself. "You taught me what it means to ask permission," he said, holding her hands as tears ran down his cheeks. "Permission to love you, to protect you, to build a life with you. And every day, I'm grateful that your answer is yes." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed Charlotte with all the tenderness and joy and promise of their future together. The reception was a backyard party with Mrs. Chen's dumplings and too much champagne and dancing on the brick patio to music from a borrowed speaker. Charlotte's favorite moment came when she was dancing with her new husband as the sun set behind the garden walls. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, spinning her gently. Charlotte looked around at their small group of family and friends, at Eleanor laughing with Mrs. Chen, at Tessa taking pictures of everything, at the garden where they'd had their first real conversation and their first real kiss. "Only one," she said. Marcus's face fell slightly. "What's that?" "That we can't do this every day." Marcus's smile was bright enough to light the whole garden. "We can do something better," he said. "What's that?" "We can wake up married to each other every day." "That does sound pretty good." "The best." As they swayed together in the growing twilight, Charlotte marveled at how different her life had become. A year ago, she'd been a scared, lonely girl who let other people make her decisions. Now she was a woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to fight for it. She was married to a man who saw her, who valued her opinions, who asked permission before kissing her every single time. She was building a business, making her own choices, creating a life that was completely and perfectly hers. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked. How lucky we are. Lucky how? Charlotte looked up at her husband, and smiled. Lucky that your grandmother taught you to pay attention to people. Lucky that my mother hired you to protect me. Lucky that we were brave enough to fight for this. Lucky that you asked if you could kiss me during that storm. Lucky that you said yes. Marcus spun her one more time, then pulled her close as their song ended. Ready to start our real adventure? He asked. With you, I'm ready for anything. 6 months later, Charlotte stood in the front yard of a small house with a wraparound porch and flower boxes under every window. The sold sign had just been planted in the front lawn. What do you think? Marcus asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. I think it's perfect. Even though the kitchen needs updating and the back fence is falling down? Especially because of those things. We'll fix them together. Marcus kissed the top of her head. Want to see inside again? They walked through their new home hand in hand, planning and dreaming out loud. The business was growing faster than they'd expected, and they needed the extra space for a proper office. Plus, the house had a big backyard, perfect for the dog they'd finally decided to adopt. Master bedroom, Marcus announced as they entered the largest upstairs room. Charlotte looked around at the empty space, imagining their bed by the windows, a reading chair in the corner, family pictures on the walls. Our first real home, she said softly. Our first real anything, Marcus corrected. Everything we build from now on is ours. Charlotte turned in his arms. I love you, Marcus Reed. I love you too, Charlotte Reed. She still felt a thrill every time he said her new name. Want to christen our new house? Charlotte asked with a mischievous smile. How? Instead of answering, Charlotte stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. Then she pulled back just enough to whisper against his lips. I have some ideas. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the empty walls of their empty house that was full of nothing but possibility. I like your ideas, he said, kissing her again. Outside, the sun was setting over their new neighborhood, painting their new windows gold. Somewhere in the distance, children were playing, and a dog was barking, and the world was going on about its business. But inside their house, Charlotte and Marcus were building something that was just theirs. Something honest and real and lasting. Something that had started with a simple question. May I? And an even simpler answer. Yes. As Marcus carried his wife over the threshold of their new home, Charlotte thought about all the years ahead of them, all the mornings they'd wake up together, all the challenges they'd face as partners, all the dreams they'd build into reality. She thought about the scared girl she used to be and the confident woman she'd become. She thought about her mother, who'd learned to trust her daughter's choices. She thought about Mrs. Chen, who was probably already planning what soup to bring to their housewarming party. Most of all, she thought about the man who'd seen her when everyone else just looked, who'd asked her opinion about everything, who'd taught her that the right person would always ask permission and listen to the answer. Welcome home, Mrs. Reed, Marcus said as he set her down in their empty living room. Welcome home, Mr. Reed. They stood together in the golden light of their first evening in their first house, surrounded by nothing but space and possibility and love. It was perfect. It was theirs. It was just the beginning. The end. Epilogue. 1 year later, Charlotte Reed stood at the kitchen window of their little house, watching her husband teach self-defense moves to a group of teenage girls in their backyard. Their golden retriever, Charlie, supervised from his spot in the shade. The business had grown beyond their wildest dreams. They now had 3 instructors working with them, and a waiting list for classes that stretched 2 months out. Eleanor visited every Sunday, always bringing something homemade and always staying for dinner. She and Marcus had developed an easy relationship built on mutual respect and shared love for Charlotte. Tessa had moved back to the city and was their unofficial marketing manager, using her social media skills to spread the word about their safety programs. Mrs. Chen had adopted them completely, treating them like the grandchildren she'd never had. And Charlotte? Charlotte had never been happier. She'd found her purpose in helping other people feel safe and confident. She'd found her voice in running a business that mattered. She'd found her home in this little house with its creaky floors and sunny kitchen. Most of all, she'd found herself in loving and being loved by a man who saw her clearly and chose her completely. "Charlie, inside," Marcus called as the class ended. "Dinner time." The dog bounded toward the house, followed by Marcus, who was grinning and slightly sweaty from the workout. "How'd it go?" Charlotte asked as Marcus washed his hands at the kitchen sink. "Great. Jenny finally mastered the wrist escape technique, and Sarah asked if we offer classes for her little sister. I love that they trust us with their families." Marcus dried his hands and moved to stand behind Charlotte, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Speaking of families," he said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About how good you are with the kids in our classes, about how much you love Sunday dinners with your mom, about how Charlie adores you." Charlotte leaned back against his chest. And I keep thinking about what our own kids might be like." Charlotte's heart fluttered. They'd talked about children in abstract terms, but this felt different, more real. "What do you think they'd be like?" she asked. "Brave like their mom, kind like their mom, stubborn like their mom." Charlotte laughed. "What about like their dad? Patient, good listeners, excellent at asking permission for things." "That sounds like pretty great kids." "The best kids." Charlotte turned in Marcus's arms. "Are you asking me something, Mr. Reed?" "I'm asking if you want to start trying. For those great kids." Charlotte looked around their kitchen, with its cheerful yellow walls and the pictures of their wedding displayed on the windowsill. She thought about the bedrooms upstairs, waiting to be filled with laughter and tiny voices, and all the beautiful chaos of family life. She thought about the little girl or boy who might inherit Marcus's steady calm or her own stubborn determination. She thought about teaching them to be brave, to speak up for themselves, to ask for what they wanted, and listen to the answers they received. "Yes," she said, just like she had on that first stormy night when Marcus had asked if he could kiss her. "Yes to great kids and family dinners and everything that comes with building a life together." Marcus's smile was brilliant and warm and completely hers. "I love you, Charlotte Reed." "I love you too." Outside, the sun was setting over their neighborhood, painting their little house in soft gold light. Charlie was already asleep in his favorite spot by the back door. The business was thriving. Their families were healthy and happy, and they had each other. It wasn't the life Charlotte had been raised to expect. It was smaller in some ways, quieter, more ordinary. It was also perfect. As Marcus kissed his wife in their sunny kitchen, Charlotte marveled once again at how much courage it had taken to ask for what she wanted. How much bravery it required to choose love over expectation, honesty over comfort, partnership over control. But every single day, she was grateful she'd found that courage. Every single day, she was grateful for the storm that had brought them together. Every single day, she was grateful for a man who knew how to ask permission and wait for the answer. Every single day, she chose him all over again. And every single day, he chose her back. It was enough. It was everything. It was love.